There's so much more to Westmont that meets the eye. We have a beautiful campus, but we have such an amazing and gifted faculty. And I, as a campus pastor, we want to bring speakers in, and we bring some in, but I look around at our faculty and I think, we have such riches here. And Dave Newton is one of them. He's professor of entrepreneurial finance. He was raised on the East Coast. You would never know it by talking to him and even looking at him now. Believe me, I lived in Jersey for a while. But Dave was educated in the East at Boston University, has taught at Pepperdine and here for the last 22 years. He is a creative thinker, a bold and innovative thinker, and he is a lover of Jesus Christ. And David, I'm so glad to have you speak to us this morning. So the Lord be with you and bless you, and we welcome you in the name of Christ.
Can you put the mic down for me? All right. I'm just going to be watching a movie while we're doing this as well simultaneously here, so just... Anybody else doing that? Just two of you. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I have most of your attention. Well, thanks, Ben. Good morning. I'm David Newton. I'd like you to consider with me the concept this morning of our identity. And not simply who we are individually on the micro level, but our place in the much broader macro level as well, in this world in which we live, and ultimately who we truly are in the spiritual dimension. Now, 1 Corinthians says, "Let no one boast in men, for all things belong to Christ." So then it's not about whom you know in your social circles, your networks, your referrals, but it's simply that you belong to Christ. In January, I was again a member of the press covering for 3 different magazines the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. That's a tough job to have to go do. 2 million square feet of exhibit space reminded me of the incredible extent of our contemporary global telecommunications infrastructure and the complexity of how fiber optics and microwave and wireless and cloud-based networks have created literally billions of touch points for human interconnectivity. In fact, I'd love to do a little experiment this morning. Why don't you take out your cell phones, turn them on. Let's see your screens. Look at this, huh? Ooh, yeah. I've always wanted to do this. So, okay, so see that? 15 years ago, if I had asked you to pull out your cell phones, there wouldn't be any, right? Think of it. Billions of terabytes, so much data, text, images, voice, video, right at your fingertips in constant motion around the globe. We're so seemingly connected, so closely linked, apparently, so immediate in our accessibility, but we are really closer? Are we really closer to each other? And is our personal profile really our true identity? One perspective regards everything we see in this physical world, including ourselves, as simply an accidental output from millions of iterations of random chance. But the other ascribes the physical world and our very being as intentionally designed for a specific purpose, and as such there is meaning on a meta level, deliberately enmeshed with our physical infrastructure. The former view is 100% natural, but the latter recognizes that we are also inherently supernatural. Genesis has a nice quote on this. It certainly speaks of the uniqueness of mankind, of intention, of purpose, and design. Our planet remains conspicuously unique in the solar system. If it ever comes up here. Maybe? Have none of the slides been even working? Hey, Brad, can you help me? Okay. I'm not sure why this isn't. Maybe? Well, there we go. We missed that one. Well, that's the Consumer Electronics Show. Okay, next one. That's being made in God's image. That's pretty good. Let's go to the next one. There we go. Our planet remains conspicuously unique in the solar system, and by all current models, most likely singular in its anthropic design in the universe. It's tilted at a 23-degree axis, rotating once every 24 hours, set on a routine, very methodical 365-day orbit around a fairly average star. Look at us there. suspended in space. It's worth noting that our human recorded history only covers about 70 centuries. Think of that. It's not really that long. The typical physical time frame for a contemporary human life right now is it's over half a century. So on average, think this way. There's only about maybe 2 life cycles per century, which means that we're not that many links removed in terms of number of persons connected to, let's say, the American Revolution, or the Renaissance, or the signing of the Magna Carta, or even Constantine's Edict of Toleration. Now here in the US, a contemporary life spans about 80% of a century, so let's call it 8 decades. And for some remarkable reason, the human race demarcates our planet's current time as being the 21st century. But why does the entire planet refer to time in that regard? 21st century from when? See, in sequential ascending order, it starts from a global reference point in our past. There's a single occurrence that breaks up human recorded history into roughly 50 centuries before that event, and now 20 centuries or so since that time. And it's worth noting that all of us ultimately have our identity linked directly in some regard to that recorded human event, to that turning point back in the 1st century. And I'm going to call it this morning the ultimate network connection. And it defines the only real network connection any of us really need to have and be involved in. But just hold that thought for a moment. Today, right now, just happens to be the 86th day in the 13th year since the 20th century came to an end. But even our time count here is relative to our physical positioning on the planet, because 55 miles west of here, it's already 5 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. Think of that. Okay, it's already the next day. See, our third rock, oh, look at that, it worked. Our third rock from the sun supports literally millions of species of unique life forms, most notably humans, of which there are 7 billion on the planet at this time. Interestingly, on average, 56 million people cease to exist every year. That's 150,000 deaths every 24-hour day. Did you know that? It's even more provocative that 127 million new people begin their lives each year. That's 350,000 new people, new humans, every day on this planet. Gives us a net gain of around 200,000 new people per day. 71 million a year. Who you are, and is there meaning to life in this purely natural sense, might have been summed up quite nicely and succinctly by a 1980s anthem from a British punk new wave band that is a favorite of mine named the Godfathers. From their perspective, human existence is summarized as just 4 mundane stages: birth, school, work, and death. That's the chorus. The verse says, I've been high and I've been low and I don't know where to go. I'll live and die, don't ask me why, I want to go to paradise. I don't need your sympathy, there's nothing in this world for me. Wow. What a sad and hopeless commentary on a lack of meaning for these 7 billion people who have upwards of 8 decades of conscious life. My own particular existence started 2,700 miles east of here toward the end of the 1950s, in the 6th decade of the 20th century, after that turning point in human time. On our current US-based life expectancy of, let's say, about 8 decades, I stand here this morning, I did the calculation, it seems I've used up about 67% or 2/3 of my time. Ouch. Taken another way, I'm actually down to about 1/3 of my remaining time, potentially, assuming I get the 8 decades. See, my physical structure is in a slow, steady decline of its physical attributes and functionality. And for most of you, on the other hand, you're in pretty good position. You've completed on average only about maybe 1/4 of your 8 decades, if that's your projected time, maybe 75% still to come, maybe. So if we average those 200, or in this case, 29,000 days left in a lifetime, you know, I've lived 19,000 of those days already. 19,000 days. Wow. Think what that looks like in a Google Calendar, right? It leaves me with about 240,000 hours left, maybe. But then I considered this, I'm going to be asleep for 80,000 of those hours. Wow, 1/3 of them. So think of it. Is life simply just passing time? How does life then matter? How does it have purpose, meaning? I'd like to argue that without the ultimate network connection, maybe the Godfathers actually got it right. It's nothing more than birth, school, work, and death. You're finishing up your second of those four, right? So then, what does Luke say, though? Which of you, by worrying, could even add a single hour to your lifespan? So here we are. We're assembled for 1 hour. There's about 1,000 humans here in this room out of 7 billion on the planet, kind of a small group. We're probably the only planet with intelligent life, with hundreds of satellites orbiting in a massive grid overhead. Isn't that amazing? And cell towers and fiber optic cables and data clouds and file servers continuously streaming trillions of bytes of information at 180,000 miles per second. There are some 2.5 billion people on this planet, more than 36%, who regularly access the web. In fact, as I stand here, there are simultaneously, right at this moment, 1 billion people online right now. That's 1 in 7 people on the planet. In fact, our Westmont IT monitoring department shows that there's actually, 53 in this room who are online right now. So, interesting, okay? Give me your divided attention. Thank you. So many people, so much data information instantly at our access, but who are we really? What is our identity? Well, the psalmist asked this question as well, and I think this is profound. My question is intentionally designed to get you to stop in the middle of this busy day, 5 weeks before the end of the semester, and reflect on your own relative positioning, physically within both our local and global space-time, but let's also fold in a second separate dimension, our unique meta-experience that functions parallel as a complement to our physical taking up of space. You see, all of us in this room are both hardware and software. Now, my hardware that you're looking at right now weighs in at 190 pounds, an internal calcium-based frame woven with miles of electrocirculatory wiring, wrapped with a very stretchy, flexible outer covering, a little more stretchy than I'd like it to be these days. This piece down here has been sagging for a couple years here, I don't know. And I'm a late 1950s model. Most of you are kind of an early 90s model, a little more streamlined than my model right now. I was produced in Philadelphia. My natural composition is 50% British, 50% Swedish components. But what about my software? Do I have a measurable meta component? Who I am, my identity, is either just the physical natural with some random consciousness by accident, same as the other 349,999 who get born every day, and I simply come through the life counting out birth, school, work, and death. Or I have a meta link through this ultimate network connection, this spiritual channel. And it's who I am truly in the supernatural, intentionally designed by someone for something much more than simply birth, school, work, and death. Everybody knows what this is, right? Oops. Little scan disk, 16 gig flash drive. Empty right out of the package. You know what it weighs? Half an ounce. I load it up with music, graphics, thousands of pages of text, a couple movies, photos, some video, and then I weigh it again. Totally filled. What does it weigh? Half an ounce. The exact same half ounce. So it is with my spirit. My body has physical mass and weight, and it's temporal, but my software is metaphysical. It's eternal. And the coolest thing is that my internal software was automatically installed at my origination. It was designed and engineered by a 3-person creative team in their own image, in their likeness. Look what Psalm says about that. And this internal operating system is auto-learning, cumulative sequential, and further develops higher competencies over time. I mean, it's supposed to. Maybe it doesn't. So, now, my particular resident heuristic operating system was primarily developed during my first 10 to 12 years in a closed experimental environment known as New Jersey, during which certain forms of learning and various types of knowledge were processed and downloaded. A good deal of those files, thankfully, have been deleted over time. Oh. And I still have on my hard drive 1 or 2 old files from that original programming language. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, so that comes out every once in a while. So then, do we belong to anything bigger than ourselves? Are we part of something more than just an 8-decade timeline? Or was I just one of those 350,000 born randomly on a given day? Will I simply play out a form of American life expectancy and then just be one of those 150,000 who die each day, and that's it. But 1 Corinthians, thankfully, says this, that I've been purchased. Oops, boy, we're behind again. Sorry about that. I've been purchased with a price, and I now belong to God. Perhaps the fastest growing network of market applications in the high-tech arena comes down to the connectivity of multiple levels of social networking. And while you may have 3,000 or more friends through your various online portals, what really is your identity? Do you belong to something bigger, more eternal than your online circle? And I have to say, I got to go on record right here. Axel and Lars, those two guys at Uppsala University outside of Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden, the guys you play online Call of Duty with, they are not your friends. Okay, just make sure we're clear on that. Okay, good. Okay. So is it having 3,000 plus Facebook friends, or in my phone I have 928 contacts on LinkedIn, or is it chatting with a great match on eHarmony, or getting a high score on Super Mario Brothers against a 7th grader in China? Or finally launching your profile on christianmingle.com? Look, there are multiple circles in one's life proximity where you might try to link in your identity, looking for meaning and belonging to something. For some, it's all about being in the right circle of friends, being accepted, having certain social status within a close-knit group. But John 15 says that I am actually now what? I'm the friend of God. That's a good poke. Some pour themselves completely into sports. A winning team is one's identity. But wait a minute. 1 Timothy says that profit from bodily exercise is minimal compared to the reward for pursuing godliness. For some, it's finances or a certain income level, investments, a career, professional status, prestige, rank, a job title, putting one's citizenship in earthly wealth and possessions. But wait a minute. Paul wrote to the Philippians that I'm actually now what? A citizen of heaven. Good. Some make family everything. Here's my family. This is last year at Father's Day at Neptune's Net down on PCH in Malibu. It's quite a crew. I've shelled out a lot of cash in the last 12 years for college to that group right there, so that's why they're smiling, okay? And while comprising a great deal of my life and part of me, and be married 30 years this summer to my wife, even an earthly family does not satisfy the answer to who I truly am. But there is a spiritual family that you can be part of, a perpetual ultimate network larger than just one person. Drum roll. All right? Oh, there you go. Good. This ultimate network spans several decades. In fact, centuries, going all the way back to that key event 20 centuries ago, that milestone in human recorded history when eyewitnesses confirmed each other's accounts and wrote down about a 30-year time period for this Middle Eastern Jewish man by the name of Yehoshua in Hebrew. He met and fulfilled dozens of very specific criteria that established him as a long-awaited, long-anticipated human incarnation of spiritual God, from whom came outside of time and space and designed and put in place the entire physical world in which we live. And he made a very unique spiritual provision for all mankind to know true, lasting, substantial meaning and identity in this earthly life, with a trustworthy expectation for a spiritual relationship to continue without end after this physical life is over. So I'd like you to consider joining this ultimate network connection. I'd like to encourage each of you to be spiritually active in this ultimate network. There's no online page to go to. It's completely virtual. It's entirely automatic. You sign in, you do your updates, connections, stay linked in, no cost. Yes, it's free for life. It's already been paid for. And your membership is not only for this physical time on earth, but it'll continue after this natural life ends. Your metaphysical person can actually now exhibit to others who interact with you the very identity of the original three-person design team as they program their image and their likeness in you. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. In fact, as you sit here today, many of you are already good members of this virtual ultimate connection. Did you know that there are only 35 people between me standing here today and Jesus in the first century? That this ultimate network is really not as big as you think it is. It's actually pretty close-knit. Look at the names up there. Who influenced whom? Jesus' disciple John, and so on, and so on, and so on, right down there. As you take a look at this ultimate connection, continues right on through the 11th century, comes right on down into the 1700s. And most closely for me, Hudson Taylor had an influence on D.L. Moody, who had an influence on Nathaniel Van Cleve, who had an influence on Pastor Chuck Smith, who had an influence on a guy named Ricky Ryan, and both Smith and Ryan have had an influence on me. That's only 35 people from here to Jesus. That's the ultimate network connection that you can belong to. So I encourage you this morning, plug in directly, intentionally, be fully committed to the family of God. Don't worry about updating your Facebook status. Taking your place in the rich history and continuity of the faith in Christ, with the one to whom you have your true identity and meaning and purpose to this earthly life, and a promise of eternal, uninterrupted fellowship with the Creator of everything you see. Exactly who you were designed to be. That's the ultimate network. Look at what it says in Colossians. So now we're going to close this morning with a very special musical offering from a band that is near and dear to my own heart. You see, well before my life at Westmont, going back 30 years, I played guitar and sang in a new wave punk band called the Transformatics. Between 1978 and 1986, we were part of a pretty big movement. An era in rock's history, first in New York and Boston and then in Orange County. During that time, my identity was absolutely 100% completely engrossed and focused on making it in the music industry. Here are some of our contemporaries from the mid-1980s at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. We're in the upper right photo. That's that 23-year-old version of me on the far left side. But while national recording fame never happened, God turned my eyes instead to Him and told me that, you know what, it's going to be okay if your identity isn't in being a full-time musician. And through the power of His Spirit, He transformed my life. But I thought it'd be really fitting if the message that we close with today, we could get a nice message from the band. The problem is we live in 4 different states and I couldn't get them to get in here today. So the Transformatics haven't really performed at a college campus since 1986 at UC Irvine. So originally, Joel and I explored having the worship team join me in a cover version, but then we decided, let's do this. Let's remaster an old 30-year-old reel-to-reel digital audio tape from a Boston concert of 1982, 30 years ago. Edit out the crowd noise so the message can come through nice and loud for you this morning. And so whatever you might be holding on to, believing it defines your identity, be it family, wealth, school, grades, professional career path, sports, friends, I'd like to encourage you this morning to seek your meaning, your true purpose in life, your true identity in God alone as the only one who can really satisfy. You really are part of something much larger, an unbroken chain of fellow believers that stretches back 20 centuries right to Jesus Himself. You've been adopted into that century-old family of God. And if anything's holding you back, the best way to join God's ultimate network connection is to simply let it all go.